Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Bladesinger wizard. And I'm going to warn you right off the bat, we're probably going to make a bunch of comparisons to some of the other quote-unquote Gish type classes. Things like the Hexblade Warlock, your Paladins, your Rangers, Eldritch Knights, anything else that has the ability to mix it up in melee combat, like Valor Bards and College of Swords Bards, for example. So people who can mix up in melee but are also spellcasters. And I don't really like comparing them all, but I do want to point out that I feel like the Bladesinger is one of the most unique of the bunch in the sense that the wizard has probably the best spell list in the entire game. At least in my opinion they do. And I find that a lot of times with Bladesingers, a common mistake is people forget that they're a wizard and they just take all spells to help them in melee combat. And by the way, I'm not saying don't take any. Haste is still a great spell. Like, don't be afraid to take it, right? But they forget that they're a wizard and they just start acting like they're a fighter. The true strength of the Bladesinger is that you could be maintaining concentration on a big spell, like an animate object or some sort of summon spell, like one of the New Testament one, or a summon greater demon or whatever else. You could be doing that, and you could be facing like melee combat while using your blade song to help you maintain concentration on a spell by boosting your armor class, boosting your concentration and saving throw with your blade song, and using your melee attack with extra attack. You get the cantrip on one attack. So you could be using a booming blade attack or a green flame blade attack, plus your regular attack, plus maintaining concentration on your summon spell or whatever other big spell you have. And where a more traditional wizard is going to have to kind of hold back and just kind of pew with a firebolt or whatever every round, or a Toll the Dead, and frankly do rather poor damage with those, right? Or they're going to have to be dropping a lot of like direct damage spells, expending a lot of spell slots. You're able to do some pretty good damage thanks to the fact that you can use your melee attack with a booming blade or a green flame blade and another attack on top of that, and maintain concentration on a spell. And thanks to Blade Song, you're probably not going to have to worry about losing concentration on that spell. And I think that this is where the Bladesinger really shines, is the fact that you don't have to just rely on rather pathetic cantrip damage. You can get in there, mix it up, and still be a wizard. So I wanted to kind of state that up front. I also think that unlike some of the bards are a good example of classes where even though you get extra attack, maybe you get some blade flourishes or a fighting style if you want the College of Swords. Maybe you get medium armor and a shield if you want College of Valor. But they don't have a lot to boost their damage. The Bladesinger gets a lot. You get your intelligence added to all your weapon damage at level 14. And yeah, that's pretty late, but it's not the worst thing ever. You get at level 6, you can use a cantrip as one of your attacks from your extra attack feature. Now, is this as good as a paladin being able to drop lots of smites? Probably not, although you're not using a resource, right? It's just free every round. But it's probably not as good overall. But it's also not requiring resources, and you have 9th level spells. A paladin doesn't, right? The ranger only has 5th level spells. Your Eldritch Knight is limited to 4th level spells. Now, is a level 20 Eldritch Knight going to do more melee damage than your level 20 wizard? Yeah, but he doesn't have Wish. He doesn't have Force Cage. He doesn't have Contingency or, Maze or Hypnotic Pattern, probably. Well, he could have Hypnotic Pattern, actually. He could have Counterspell. But he doesn't have Wall of Force. He doesn't have any of the great spells that you have. And I think that's where the Bladesinger really shines, is that you are a full caster and you've got a great spell list, but you also do some pretty good melee damage. And yeah, you are pretty glass cannon-ish. You've only got a d6 for your hit points. And these days, your blade song is a lot more limited. We're going to be talking mostly about the Tasha's version, because that's the most recent one, and that's kind of now the official one, as opposed to the Sword Coast Adventure Guide. But we will talk about some of the differences where they arise. But anyways, I don't want to waste a lot of time on this preamble, but I did want to say that I really like the Bladesinger. And I tend to really like Gish classes in general. I like these melee caster types where I just have a lot of responses to a lot of different problems where and you can perform really well in all three pillars of play. You know, you've got the exploration stuff, especially with a lot of spells. Maybe you've got greater invisibility or whatever else, right? So you can do that kind of stuff. You've got things like your mass suggestion to help you really dominate in the social pillar. You know, and spells are really just one of the best ways to do anything. You know, they just are. They're awesome. And you've got the best spells in the game, in my opinion. So, you know, you're well set up there. And then instead of like having to rely on cantrips where you're just regular melee damage, which is pretty poor, you've got extra attack where you can use a cantrip and an extra attack on top of that. And so your damage tends to be pretty good. And as you get to high levels, 14 plus, you also get your intelligence added to your attacks. So I feel that it's a pretty strong class. But anyways, let's get into the specific abilities. Then we're going to talk about some of my thoughts on spells. We won't go into a lot of detail on spells. I still think take the best wizard spells available. And if that means counterspell and web and hypnotic pattern, then take those. Even if they have no specific purpose on your Bladesinger. The other thing is though, you can add in spells like a shadow blade or a spirit shroud or whatever else, you know. And so really you've got the wizard spell list, but where a lot of those more melee focused spells are useless on more wizards, you can make use of them still. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't take a familiar at level 1, you know. I'd still do that. Anyways, so your specific abilities. Level 2, you're going to choose your arcane tradition just like every other wizard. You can choose Bladesinger, obviously, otherwise you wouldn't be here. Level 2, you're going to get training in War and Song. You gain proficiency with light armor, and you gain proficiency with one type of one-handed melee weapon of your choice. This is probably going to be a finesse weapon, so you can use dexterity, but it doesn't have to be anymore. That's one of the changes from Tasha's. You used to have to be an elf or half-elf to choose Bladesinger. And now you can be any race, which personally I think is a huge improvement. I don't really like these like race-gated classes so much. And you see that in some MMOs as well, where you have to be a certain race or a certain gender to take certain classes. I just, I'm not a big fan of it necessarily. I like having lots of options, you know? So, you know, now you could be a halfling Bladesinger. Why not? I like that idea. You could be a half-orc Bladesinger and go with strength, you know? Would that be the most optimal choice? Probably not. Probably not the one I'm taking. But I do think there'd be some cool roleplay potential there, so why not, you know? The fact is that now that's an option, and before it wasn't. You also gain proficiency in the performance skill if you didn't already have it. And frankly, why would you take it if you're going to get it at level 2 for free? So, you know, do it that route. You're also going to get the Blade Song ability at level 2. You can invoke an elven magic called the Blade Song, provided you aren't wearing medium or heavy armor or using a shield. It graces you with supernatural speed, agility, and focus. You can use a bonus action to start your Blade Song, which lasts for 1 minute. It ends early if you are incapacitated, if you don medium or heavy armor or a shield, or if you use 2 hands to make an attack with a weapon. You can also dismiss the Blade Song at any time with no action required. Now, frankly, the only one of those that really matters is incapacitated, because you're not going to be donning medium or heavy armor in the middle of a fight. I mean, I guess this does stop lame stuff like I'm blade singing, and after I've started blade singing, I will put on my shield. You know, it specifically says you can't blade song with a shield. This is just their way of making sure you don't try to do it. It also eliminates a few multi-class options, like say the Artificer Armorer Bladesinger multi-class, because now you can't just be like, oh, action, put on my armor, boom, done. You know, not gonna happen. But that's okay. So here's what you get from your Blade Song. You get a bonus to your armor class equal to your intelligence modifier, a minimum of +1. Your walking speed increases by 10 feet. You have advantage on dexterity acrobatics checks, and you gain a bonus to your constitution to maintain concentration on spell saving throws, equal to your intelligence modifier +1. And these are the 2 big ones. The bonus to your armor class, the bonus to your concentration saving throws, both keying off your intelligence modifier. This is what's going to let you maintain concentration on a key spell while still mixing it up in melee combat. Now here's where we got the nerf from Sword Coast Adventure's Guide to Tasha's. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So at low levels, that's going to be 2 per short or 2 per long rest. Eventually it will scale up to 6, but at low levels you got 2, eventually 3, 4, etc. It used to be you got 2 per short rest, and this meant that if you had, say, 2 encounters and then you take a short rest, 2 more encounters, take another short rest, 2 encounters, camp for the night, take a long rest, you could have a blade song available in every single encounter in the day. This is obviously a nerf because now you've got it twice at low levels. It does mean that you have to be more strategic, and frankly, I think it's a change for the best. It does mean you're less powerful, but I think it's overall good. And it also eliminates a lot of like multi-class dips that we used to see before, where you'd go like save rogue, but you take 2 levels of Bladesinger wizard just so you could blade song every single fight and have the extra movement and armor class and stuff, right? And not saying that was a bad idea, because that was a great multi-class back in the days, but I can see why they might not have wanted people to do that all the time. And it means more motivation now to go Bladesinger instead of just to take 2 levels of wizard just for blade song, right? So overall, I think it's probably a change for the best, but it is clearly a nerf. So level 6, here's where things start getting better and the nerfs end. Extra attack. You can attack twice instead of once whenever you take the attack action on your turn. That's the same as Sword Coast. However, this is what changes. Moreover, you can cast one of your cantrips in place of one of those attacks. So now you could make a Booming Blade or a Green Flame Blade attack and then still use your extra attack on top of that as just a regular melee attack. So you could Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade and attack all in the same turn. And this is awesome because by the time you hit level 6 to get the extra attack, your Booming Blade and your Green Flame Blade have already leveled up once at level 5 and are now doing an extra D8 damage. And another D8 on top of that at 11, and another one at 17. So this extra attack is hitting harder, plus we're getting the other advantages of the spell, right? So if Booming Blade, if they move, they take extra damage. With the Green Flame Blade, if there's another target within 5 feet, we can damage that target as well. No hit roll even required. We just have to hit the guy we're aiming at with that Green Flame Blade. And if we hit him, we automatically damage the other guy. But it's worth pointing out, this does give us some other flexibility. Yes, I'm mostly going to be using a Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade, right? But I could use it with a Minor Illusion. It doesn't have to be a melee attack cantrip. I could use it with a Thorn Whip and pull somebody in. I could even use it with, say, like a Toll the Dead or a Firebolt. Now, granted, with a Firebolt, I'm going to have disadvantage to hit if I'm in melee combat still. But maybe I kill this guy with my melee attack and then I Firebolt somebody else. Could happen. I probably am going to prefer Toll the Dead, though, because then I don't need a hit roll, right? So I can melee attack this guy and I can Toll the Dead somebody else and help one of my allies out. Now, 99% of the time, I'm probably not going to be choosing that option. Maybe 95% of the time. But the fact is that that option is there. And I'm probably going to want to have at least one ranged cantrip I can use, right? In case I don't end up getting into melee, or maybe I just don't have a blade song available because I've already used them all. And, now rushing into combat is a lot riskier because I've got D6 hit points and light armor, not your go-to picks for frontline fighters. Blade Song helps to mitigate that, but if I don't have a Blade Song available, I might want to just fall back and act like a normal wizard. So, having a ranged option is still pretty good there. Level 10, Song of Defense. If you have a Blade Song active, when you take damage, you can use your reaction to expend one spell slot and reduce the damage done to you by an amount equal to 5 times that spell slot's level. So if you use a level 3 spell slot, you'll reduce 15 damage. If you use a level 5, you'll reduce 25 damage, etc., right? In general, if I can just use a shield spell to avoid all the damage, I'm going to prefer that. But shield's not going to help me if I get a critical hit or something along those lines. And I'm really going to like this option if I'm maintaining concentration on a key spell. Like maybe I use a Summon Greater Demon spell and I'm blade singing now and I'm up front and I'm just like, oh, I got no problems. I got my blade song, so now I'm hard to hit I've got bonuses to my concentration saving throw because of Blade Song. So, no problem. And then I get crit by a fire giant, take a truckload of damage, and now we've got a rogue demon that's kind of tearing everybody up. That's a bad time to lose concentration on my demon there. But if I could be like, ooh, maybe I need to give up a high level spell slot, mitigate a bunch of that damage, or maybe even all the damage, not have to worry about the saving throw in the first place. But even just mitigating a bunch of it and making that concentration saving throw a lot easier, that might be a good option. It's also good if I just would have gone down in combat. Better to just not get knocked unconscious in the first place. And yeah, maybe I have to sacrifice a spell slot, but that spell slot's going to come back, So, not the greatest ability, but certainly not a bad one either. It's kind of like your emergency release valve. Level 14, Song of Victory. You can add your intelligence modifier, minimum +1, to the damage to your melee weapon attacks while your Blade Song is active. This is a really good ability, just more damage. It is only the damage. It doesn't add your intelligence bonus to the 2-hit. It only adds to damage. It's obviously very similar to what Pact of the Blade Warlocks get, except frankly theirs is better. They get theirs at 12. We get this at 14. They get it added to any weapon attack with their Pact Blade, with their Pact weapon, but that's going to be like pretty much all their attacks anyways. We get it with Blade Song available. So if we're not blade singing, we don't get it. So not as good as theirs, but still pretty good. And this is one thing I want to point out, as opposed to one of the reasons I like the Bladesinger is that in those situations when a traditional wizard would just be forced to pew away for frankly rather terrible damage with a cantrip, maybe you're just firebolting or Toll the Dead, and your damage is pretty lackluster. One thing that the Bladesinger has is that you're getting some cantrip damage, which is going to scale, like we already mentioned. That's already better, right? B, at higher levels here, you're going to get your intelligence bonus added to the damage. Again, much better, especially if you're attacking twice around. That could be an extra 10 damage with 20 int, right? No problem. You're also getting the advantages of a magical weapon. Maybe you have a magic rapier that you're using at this point. You've got a +2 rapier, or you've got a rapier with some sort of special property. Like maybe it's a flame tongue, and now you're getting fire damage added to all your hits. These are things that you weren't going to get from a firebolt or the Toll the Dead. And that as you find this better equipment, you're going to be able to use that every round and just get more benefits from it, right? So I do like the fact that I have that option. And this is where I really like the Gish classes in general. That I just like having lots of options, and the fact that I have my spells and I have decent melee damage, frankly, and I've got, a bunch of this stuff really helps them to help out. And, this ability isn't quite as good as the Hex or as the Pact of the Blade Warlock ability, but you have a better spell list than the Warlock does. And I love Warlocks. I'm not trying to trash Warlocks at all. I'm just saying nothing has everything, right? There's always going to be trade-offs, no matter what class you're picking, no matter multi-class. I love Paladin Sorcerer multi-class and Paladin Warlock multi-class, but Paladin Sorcerer, for example, and you can quicken cast your spells, and so you can cast a spell and you're still going to be able to make your melee attacks. You've got your smites. You can have pretty high-level spells as you level up. But if you took extra attack, you're not going to have 9th level spells on that Sorcerer. You're just not. That's just the way it is. And this guy does, right? Maybe you don't have the bonus to all your saving throws that the Paladin does. But you do have bonuses to your concentration saving throw. And you have a better spell list than the Paladin does. You have a better spells than the Sorcerer does, unless he took Divine Soul, in which case now he's picking from the Cleric spell list too. So, that's starting to get a little more iffy. But either way, I'd put the Wizard spell list up there as at least comparable. And you've got 9th level spells that he doesn't, So I do think that while this class does have some drawbacks, you are definitely more of a glass cannon. But you've also got a lot of cannon. And compared to, say, the Bards, who also have a great spell list, not knocking the Bards, right? And with Magical Secrets, they can steal some of your best spells and just have those on their spell list too, right? They could take a Wish spell if they want it. They can take Sealing Chroma, whatever else they wanted to steal from your spell list. But they aren't getting a lot of the scaling damage bonuses that you get. They're not getting to add a cantrip in there in addition to their, as one of their attacks. They're not getting their charisma bonus added that you and the Warlock are getting, right? Effectively. Yours is intelligence, but you know what I'm saying. So I do think that as far as like those type of things, you measure up really well against everybody because you have a lot of the other classes' best abilities. And on top of that, you've got a better spell list. The difference is, of course, that you're very squishy. And your blade songs are a lot more limited than they used to be, and you have to use them more strategically now. And if you have a blade song available, you become pretty tanky. I mean, not in the sense of taking damage, but in the sense that you're hard to hit. And if you do get hit, you're probably going to make that concentration saving throw, especially if you have a max int and a decent con score, right? And then you can combine it with feats. You can have a Warcaster or a Resilient Con feat. And you're going to measure up really well against anybody. But when you don't have a blade song available, not so much. And I do think the glass cannon becomes a lot less glass and a lot more cannon as you level up and you have more blade songs available. Anyways, that's that part. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the spells. And like I said, a common mistake I've seen on Bladesingers is that people just go all in on their melee spells and they forget that they're still a wizard. And it's like, man, you could have Force Cage, you could have Contingency and Wall of Force and, Wish, everything else. You can have all the greatness of the wizard spell list. And yeah, you've also got a Shadow Blade available. You've got Misty Step available. You've got Spirit Shroud. Don't be afraid to take those spells too. But don't overlook Hypnotic Pattern and Counterspell just because you have Spirit Shroud, because frankly, they're better spells most of the time, So don't stop being a wizard just because you can also melee guys, is what I'm saying. So keep that in mind. For cantrips, though, I am going to take a Booming Blade or a Green Flame Blade, or both. Maybe I don't start with both, but I'm picking up both at some point, right? I'm going to have both. I might want a Thorn Whip. That one's a little more questionable, but it's not a bad choice either, right? And I'm going to want a range spell, right? I'm going to want a Toll the Dead or a Firebolt. Probably Toll the Dead, because maybe I have disadvantage on my attack roll, in which case using my extra attack might not be as good. And maybe I just want to Toll the Dead, where it doesn't require an attack roll, So I do think that that's a good one. But I want to have some sort of ranged option, especially since I may not have a lot of blade songs available at lower levels, right? I'm going to want some sort of a ranged option. But things like Minor Illusion are still good. Don't be afraid to take that. Mage Hand can be pretty handy. Don't be afraid to take that, First level spells. I'm still looking at things like Fog Cloud. I'm looking at Find Familiar, probably the best first level spell, at least for wizards, that there is. And one of the best in the entire game. I mean, maybe Healing Word, you can make an argument, might be better, but that's about the only one I can think of off the top of my head. But, Absorb Elements is a great spell on any wizard. I'm going to use it on me too. It's going to be even better. And yeah, okay, I can add a bit of elemental damage to my next attack. On most wizards, that's not going to be a thing. But on me, it is. Now, is that why I'm taking Absorb Elements? No, I'm taking it for the damage mitigation. But it also has a little bit of a rider that most wizards don't get to take advantage of. And I do. So a little extra motivation for it, It was already a great spell. It was already a 9 out of 10, Now it's just a little bit better. Now it's a 9.1. Like I said, I'm still going to like things like a Mage Armor. Maybe I don't want to wear light armor. Once I have magical armor, that's going to be a great option, right? But low levels, maybe I just want to use Mage Armor and have a good dex. That might be better still. Who knows? Definitely an option. But then Shield, of course. I'm going to take Shield on most wizards. It's going to be even better on Bladesinger. Second level spells. Obviously, things like Shadow Blade are still going to be good. I'm not saying don't take Shadow Blade. Misty Step, great spell as well. Help me get into melee range if I want to. It's a great spell, even better on this character. But things like Mirror Image, already a great spell. It's going to allow me to maintain concentration on a more important spell, though, and it's going to be even better on this character, because it doesn't need concentration itself. So I could be maintaining that concentration on, say, an animate object or whatever else I was using. Maybe I used like one of the new summons from Tasha's, like a summoned Fae. It has a duration of an hour, right? I could have that Fae with me for an hour, pre-summoned before this fight. In the first round, I'm like, oh, I'm going to drop a mirror image because I don't want to lose my Fae. I still got 50 minutes on this guy, you know? Keep him around for a while. And, you know, now I've got that option, right? And especially if I don't have a Blade Song available, things like mirror image are always going to be a good choice. And even if I do, it's just going to be, you know, it's just going to make me even harder to hit. So, again, great option. Shadow Blade, I should mention this really quickly. Rules as written, it's not as good as it used to be, and it's not the fault of Shadow Blade. It's because it changed Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, where now they have a material component, which is your weapon, that has to have a material value of like at least one silver piece or something like that. I can't remember what the exact thing is, or at least one gold piece, whatever it is. Point is, it has to have some sort of material value, and your summoned illusionary Blade of Darkness doesn't have a material value. So technically, you couldn't Booming Blade with that, which makes it not quite as good an option. But advantage in dim light or darkness, that happens quite a bit in D&D. A lot of dungeons tend to be pretty dimly lit. And it scales quite well. So still a pretty solid option for you to take. And depending on your DM, he might let you Green Flame Blade with it anyway. He might not care. He might be like, yeah, I'm cool. Just, you know, you want to Booming Blade with it? Go right ahead, right? So, still good. Same with things like Spirit Shroud. But, you know, when I start getting to like level 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 level spells, a lot of your best spells start being your summoning spells, your crowd control spells. You know, things like a Wall of Force are just absolutely amazing spells. And like I said, things like a counter spell and a hypnotic pattern are probably going to be better than a haste. Does that mean that haste is a bad spell for you to take? No, haste is still a great spell. And, you know, it was already a great spell, and now you can use it on yourself, and it's even better. And I think that haste, once you start getting to like 14th level, and you're getting your int bonus added to your weapon attacks, having a third attack around, maybe you've got, like I said, maybe you've got like a magic scimitar or a magic rapier or whatever else you're using. That gives you some sort of bonus on all your hits or attacks or whatever, right? And I think that haste actually becomes better on this character as you get to higher levels, you know? And it's a relatively low level spell slot. Once you've got like 7th and 8th and 9th level spells, a 3rd level spell slot's not really a big deal, you know? And I might want to be using higher spell slots for counterspell anyway. I'm going to upcast that more likely. Whereas haste, I'm just going to be casting at 3rd level probably, you know? So, still good, but don't feel like you have to take that as your absolute go-to. Oh, I'm going to be in melee, I have to take haste. And I'm just going to forget about counterspell or hypnotic pattern or, you know, like there's so many great 3rd level spells. 3rd levels where things really start to get good for wizards. So I just want to stress, you're still a wizard, and don't be afraid to be a wizard. You know, 4th level and up, I mean, you get things like Fire Shield, that's fine. But I prefer Greater Invisibility still. And Greater Invisibility is one that's going to be great on a wizard. It's going to be great on a melee guy. So obviously on a melee wizard, it's going to be pure gold. And I've told the story before, but I'm going to mention it briefly anyway. In a previous campaign of mine, we had a bard. He was a College of Swords bard, so he spent a lot of time in melee combat. And forgive me, I can't remember if Greater Invisibility is on the bard list or if he took it as a magical secret. But either way, he had Greater Invisibility. But he didn't just use it to give himself advantage in melee and then disadvantage to get hit if they can't see invisible, of course, right? So now he's attacking with advantage, getting attacked with disadvantage. That's great. That's awesome on a melee character, right? But it really shined, and where he really loved using it was in spellcasting duels against enemy wizards, because they couldn't see him to counterspell, and he can still see them, unless they have to see invisibility, of course, right? But, you know, so now he can cast spells on the enemy with complete impunity, and they can't counterspell him because he's invisible. And he's still counterspelling them. And then he's, you know, making his melee attacks on top of that and killing all the minions while shutting down the enemy wizard. And he's basically untouchable, you know? And it was very, very, very effective. So, you know, just saying, don't be afraid to find spells which are going to have that multi-purpose, right? You've only got limited blade songs these days. It's not like before where you're going to have it every single encounter, essentially. So have spells that are going to be good for when you're blade singing and for when you're not. That's all I'm saying. And, I really think that the blade singing shines when you're comparing it to just cantrip damage, right? And like I think I already mentioned this earlier, but if I'm maintaining concentration on, say, like an animate object spell, and then I'm blade singing on top of that, and now I'm getting my int bonus and my dex damage, my dex bonus damage as well, right? So I'm doing like, say, plus 10 damage per hit. And then I've got a magic rapier on that top of that. I've got a plus 2 or a plus 3 rapier. So I'm doing like plus 13 plus the weapon damage, and I'm getting in a booming blade on one of those attacks as well. I'm gonna like just vastly out damage somebody who's using a firebolt. And then I'm also maintaining concentration on that animate objects on top of that. And I'm using the blade song to give me the armor class and the saving throw bonuses to help me maintain concentration on the spell. And that's how I really like to see the Bladesinger. I think they really, really shine under those circumstances. So I don't want to go through all the spell levels. You get the idea. Those are like the good wizard spells are still good wizard spells. Take them. And then just mix in a few of the good song or good spells that you think will be good when you're blade singing on top of that. And I think that's where they really start to shine. As far as feat choices, I really like Warcaster and Resilient. I don't think they're necessarily mandatory on this character because you're not having sword and shield issues like you would have on, say, like an Eldritch Knight or someone like that, right? Or a multi-classed War Wizard, for example, right? Where you've got kind of funky rules where you've got both your hands are occupied, but then you need a material component or your spell casting focus or whatever else you need, right? Your arcane focus, your opponent pouch. And then you need to be able to stow something. Like it starts getting kind of weird, right? Warcaster means you don't have to worry about that. But the main advantage of Warcaster is just advantage on your concentration saving throws. So between your Constitution bonus, your Intelligence bonus, and advantage, you're probably going to be pretty good if you have Warcaster. The other thing is that if you're up in melee combat and somebody moves away from you, that you could substitute your opportunity attack for a cantrip, which means you could booming blade them, and now they're moving, and they're going to take your booming blade damage, and they're going to automatically take the rider damage from booming blade on top of that. That's pretty great. However, in my campaigns, enemies don't tend to give up a lot of opportunity attacks, so I feel like that's more circumstantial, but really good when it comes up. Resilient Con's also a great option, especially if you had an odd con score to begin with. Now you can, have an even constitution, get that next level bonus, and be proficient. Perfect. I like Lucky a lot on this kind of character, What's better than having to make a difficult concentration saving throw because you got crit? Making the DM re-roll that attack and maybe turn it into a miss entirely. Even better, And then just being able to re-roll a couple of things a day or 3 things per day is pretty strong in general. And I also like Alert, just because if I'm playing a caster especially, I like to be able to cast my crowd control spells before all the enemies have acted. I like to be able to cast my buffs before all my allies have acted. And trying to convince everyone in your party to hold their action until you've gone with your 12 initiative or whatever you had. Meanwhile the Gloomstalker Ranger with his dex bonus and his wisdom bonus and the alert feat and his Helm of Awareness, with his 29 initiative roll, he's like, I don't want to have to wait till 12. I'm just going to go now. Like trying to convince those guys to wait until you've had your action is not always easy. It's just better to go earlier in the round in those cases. When you want to cast your big crowd control, I like to do that before all the enemy have moved and screwed up my crowd control. If I want to drop a fireball on everybody, I want to do that before they've all charged my front line and gotten into melee with us, especially if I'm in melee range. I don't want to be fireballing myself. So I like Alert for those kind of things. I will say, though, that your feat choices on this kind of character are probably going to be really limited because I'm going to want a good dex, assuming I'm using dex, which probably I am, or strength, right? But we'll say dex. I'm going to want a good dex for all my attacks, and I'm going to want a good intelligence. And I'm probably going to need a decent con on top of that. So that is a lot to worry about. I'm probably only going to have room for like 1 feat choice, right? But you never know. I mean, something like a resilient con could be a really good choice. If you just sort of slide it in there, maybe you only had a 14, or maybe like a 13 or a 15 con because you couldn't really afford to take it as high. So now you just kind of slide that in there. And I do think that, especially in a point buy, you could easily have 16 in both, right? Even in a standard array, you could have 16 decks, 16 int. Not that hard, especially depending on, racial choices or whatever else, right? So anyways, that's most of my thoughts. I'm not saying that other feats aren't great, like mobile is always pretty handy, but you've already got extra mobility from your blade song. And I just think that I really want to concentrate on dex, which is going to be what I'm using in melee combat, and int, which is going to be my spell hit, my spell save DC, my armor class bonus when I blade song, my damage bonus when I blade song at higher levels. Like a lot is riding on my int, and a lot's riding on my dex, and those are going to be two stats I'm going to want to max out, probably fairly quickly. And then, like I said, there's some great feat choices on top of that, but I'm probably only going to look at one. Maybe I can fit in two. Maybe we rolled for stats and I got lucky and got a couple of 17s and 18s or whatever else, and I don't need to spend a lot of time trying to max stuff out, But in general, or maybe I went variant human and I started with the feat, right? I mean, that's always a possibility as well. Or one of the custom races from Tasha's, and I, started with the feat there as well, right? Possibilities. In which case, I'm going to look to one of those feats. But those are the four I really think shine the most. I guess Elven Accuracy might not be bad either if you went with an elf or half elf, but unless you have a way of constantly giving yourself advantage, like say you're using greater invisibility a lot, then I think there'd be a really, really strong choice. But, or maybe you're using your familiar to take the help action a lot. Again, strong choice. And, since the half feat, it could help you to get that dex up to that next level anyway. And that kind of serves both functions. It's kind of like a dex boost, and you've also got the feat on top of that. Solid choice if you went elf or half elf. But in general, that's pretty much what we got here. So anyways, those are my thoughts on the class. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and most importantly, leave me your comments in the comment section. I'd love to hear your thoughts about Bladesinger, whether or not you think it's better now than it used to be with Sword Coast, whether or not you think the changes were advantageous overall, or whether or not you think it mostly got nerfed. I'd like to hear how you think it measures up against the other Gish choices, because I really like all the Gishes. I don't really like the name Gish, to be honest. I keep using it, but it's easier to say Gish than it is to say like caster, melee, hybrid type of thing. But in general, I really like that play style. I like having answers and lots of different options for the character. I just find that really fun and rewarding, and it's just really cool to play those kind of characters. So, give me thoughts on how the Bladesinger matches up against all of them, right? Whatever else. But that's everything I have, and I'll see you next time in the dungeon. Bye.